In 1975, one movie turned a single fin into the most feared shape in the ocean, and the animal behind it still kills, on average, fewer than 10 people worldwide each year. That movie was Jaws, and its version of the ocean's biggest threat has shaped how an entire generation thinks about the water for 50 years. But somewhere in the same water, another creature causes far more human deaths every year, and almost nobody can name it. Is the animal we've been taught to fear actually the one we should worry about? That's the question we're answering today. We've been wrong about the ocean's deadliest animal. Here's the honest answer. Before we get into how we know it, the shark is not even close to the deadliest animal in the ocean, and the actual answer is stranger than a bigger, scarier predator. It isn't a single species at all. It's a group of animals so small, so quiet, and so easy to miss that most swimmers never see them before it's too late. By the end of this video, you'll understand how scientists actually measure animal danger, why the number that matters most has nothing to do with size or teeth, and why one particular animal without a single tooth in its body may kill more people every year than sharks, wolves, and bears combined. You'll also learn why some of the most lethal animals in the ocean cause almost no deaths at all, and what that contradiction says about how humans calculate risk in general. Ready to see where your fear should actually be pointed? To understand who actually deserves the title, we first need to understand how anyone counts ocean deaths in the first place, because that turns out to be much harder than counting car accidents or plane crashes. Shark attacks are relatively easy to track. They tend to happen in wealthy coastal nations with lifeguards, hospitals, and news cameras nearby, and organizations such as the International Shark Attack File at the University of Florida have logged incidents for more than a century. A shark attack makes headlines almost anywhere in the world it happens. Venomous stings work very differently. Picture a small fishing village on a remote stretch of coastline in the Philippines or Papua New Guinea, far from the nearest hospital. If a swimmer collapses in the water there, hours or days after a sting, the death might simply be recorded as drowning, because nobody performed an autopsy and nobody entered it into any marine biology database. Doesn't that already tell you something about which numbers we should trust completely and which ones we should treat as a floor, not a ceiling? There's also a second, quieter problem hiding inside the word deadliest itself. Does deadliest mean the animal that causes the most total deaths worldwide in a year? Or does it mean the animal most likely to kill you personally, if it happens to sting or bite you? Those are two completely different questions, and as we're about to see, they don't have the same answer. One measures aggregate risk across an entire population. The other measures per encounter lethality, the kind of statistic a toxicologist cares about far more than a headline writer does. Keep both definitions in mind, because this story only makes sense once you're tracking both of them at the same time. So let's take the popular hypothesis seriously, because it isn't a foolish one. Sharks are large. They have genuinely dangerous teeth, and unprovoked attacks do happen. Great white sharks, tiger sharks, and bull sharks account for the overwhelming majority of serious incidents, and a bite from any of the three can be fatal without fast medical intervention. If you had to guess which animal killed the most people in the ocean using nothing but a photograph of its teeth, the shark would be a completely reasonable answer. For decades, cultural memory backed that guess up. Jaws wasn't the only reason sharks became the face of ocean danger, but it was the loudest one, arriving in the middle of a wave of non-fiction shark coverage that ran across television for the rest of the 20th century. By the time most of us learned to swim, the shark had already been cast as the villain of the ocean, long before any of us calculated a single death toll ourselves. Here's where the hypothesis runs into a problem it can't explain away. The International Shark Attack File's own long-term data puts the global average for unprovoked fatal shark attacks in the single digits most years, a number that has stayed remarkably stable even as ocean tourism has exploded. Compare that to the estimated toll from a single group of venomous animals in Southeast Asian and Australian waters, animals with no teeth, no jaws, and in some cases no brain at all, and the gap runs the other way completely. Researchers who study jellyfish envenomation in the Indo-Pacific region have estimated death tolls in that region alone that can rival or exceed global shark fatalities in the very same year. Clearly, the shark is not the main source of the danger we've been trained to fear. So, if the biggest, sharpest predator in the ocean isn't the real answer, what is left? The first thing to understand about the real contenders for this title is that none of them are hunting you. A box jellyfish drifting near a beach in northern Australia or the Philippines isn't tracking a swimmer the way a shark tracks a seal. Its sting is closer to a reflex than a decision. Each of its tentacles is lined with thousands of microscopic stinging capsules that fire automatically the instant they detect the right combination of touch and chemical signal on a surface, whether that surface belongs to a shrimp, a small fish, or a human leg. Think of it like a pressure-sensitive trap, rather than a guided missile, closer to a tripwire than a chase. The jellyfish has no eyes fixed on you, no memory of you, and no intention toward you at all. And in most species, the sting exists purely to stun prey small enough to eat, not to injure something 1,000 times its own size. A human being who gets stung is, biologically speaking, an accident too large to be food, too unfamiliar to be recognized, just close enough to trigger a mechanism built for something else entirely. That distinction matters because it separates observation from assumption. We can observe the sting, the physical reaction, and the outcome. What we cannot observe is intent, because these animals almost certainly don't have anything resembling intent in the way we mean it. So if there's no hunter chasing you down, why does this animal still end up more dangerous on paper than one that actually is? The mechanism behind that danger comes down to venom chemistry, and one particular condition gives us the clearest window into just how disproportionate it can be. In 1952, a physician named Hugo Flecker described a strange illness affecting swimmers off the coast of Queensland, Australia. Intense pain arriving 20 minutes to an hour after what felt like a minor, almost unnoticeable sting, followed by nausea, soaring blood pressure, and in the worst cases, heart failure. Flecker named the condition Irukandji syndrome, after the Aboriginal people whose traditional land included that stretch of coast, and it's now understood to be caused by a group of small box jellyfish species, some barely larger than a fingernail. Here's the detail that should genuinely surprise you. The sting itself is often so mild that victims don't even realize anything happened until the delayed symptoms arrive. Compare that to a shark bite, an injury with an unmistakable immediate physical signature that gets treated within minutes. An Irukandji sting can put someone in a hospital hours later, far from the beach where it happened, with medical staff working from a description rather than a wound. If a weapon does more damage the less obvious it is, doesn't that flip our entire intuition about what a dangerous animal is supposed to look like? Venom this potent evolved for a purpose that has nothing to do with people. These jellyfish need to disable prey almost instantly in open water, where a wounded shrimp or larva that swims away means a meal lost forever. That's an enormous amount of evolutionary pressure aimed at speed and potency, built up over millions of years, and humans only ever experience it as an accidental side effect. Box jellyfish aren't the only animal that complicates this story, and once you start counting the full list of small, venomous ocean creatures, the picture gets even stranger. The blue-ringed octopus, found in tide pools across the Indo-Pacific, carries a neurotoxin called tetrodotoxin, potent enough to paralyze the muscles that control breathing, and it has no antivenom at all. Cone snails, slow-moving animals that look almost decorative on the sea floor, deliver venom through a tiny harpoon-like tooth, and some species carry compounds strong enough to be lethal to an adult human in a small dose. That same paralytic power has a strange second life outside the ocean. Pain researchers have spent years studying tetrodotoxin as a possible basis for next-generation local anesthetics, precisely because of how completely and selectively it can block nerve signals when the dose is carefully controlled. And yet here's the twist inside the twist. Confirmed human deaths from blue-ringed octopus and cone snails combined are astonishingly rare. likely only a handful of well-documented cases across the last century. That's the difference between the two definitions we set up earlier. Per encounter, a blue-ringed octopus bite may be more dangerous than almost anything else in the ocean. But encounters themselves are so rare, and the animal so reluctant to bite unless directly provoked, that its contribution to the overall death toll stays tiny. Box jellyfish sit at the opposite end of that same spectrum, individually less concentrated in venom potency per sting than a cone snail's toxin, but present in huge numbers in shallow water, exactly where humans swim. Isn't it strange that the animal capable of killing you fastest in a lab setting isn't the one most likely to actually kill you at the beach? So why doesn't this show up more clearly in official statistics? Part of the answer is where these deaths tend to happen. Many of the countries with the highest concentrations of dangerous box jellyfish species, including parts of the Philippines, are also places with limited coastal medical infrastructure and no centralized system for logging marine envenomation deaths, the way wealthier nations log shark attacks. Researchers who have tried to estimate real death tolls in that region have had to rely on hospital records, fishing community reports, and local news coverage pieced together after the fact, rather than one unified international database. That's an enormous contrast with shark attack data, which benefits from decades of standardized tracking, specifically because sharks generate public attention wherever they strike. Think about it this way: a death that gets photographed, reported, and cross-checked becomes a statistic. A death that happens quietly, far from a hospital, in a country without the infrastructure to investigate it, often becomes an assumption instead, filed under drowning because nobody was in a position to say otherwise. If an entire category of deaths is systematically undercounted for reasons that have nothing to do with how dangerous the animal actually is, how confident can we really be in any ranking that claims to be final? Step back for a second, because the real story here was never really about which single animal is deadliest. It's about how badly humans miscalibrate danger, and that miscalibration has a name. Psychologists call it the availability heuristic. We judge how likely something is by how easily examples of it come to mind, not by how often it actually happens. It's the same reason someone might feel more nervous boarding a plane than getting into a car. Even though flying is statistically far safer, vivid, rare disasters stick in memory far harder than common, quiet ones. A shark attack is vivid, cinematic, and instantly memorable. A jellyfish death in a coastal village most people have never heard of is none of those things, even if it happens far more often. There's also a role reversal buried in this story that most ocean documentaries never mention. For all the fear humans direct at sharks, the danger runs overwhelmingly in the other direction. Multiple long-term population studies have tracked steep, sustained declines in oceanic shark and ray populations over the past half-century, driven by overfishing and the finning trade, to the point where a significant share of shark species are now considered threatened by international conservation assessments. So while an individual human's odds of dying from a shark encounter have stayed vanishingly small for decades, an individual shark's odds of dying because of a human have gone up dramatically over that exact same stretch of time. Isn't there something almost uncomfortable about that? We spent 50 years afraid of the one animal in this story that had far more to fear from us than we ever had to fear from it, while overlooking animals that pose a genuinely larger aggregate risk simply because they don't have a recognizable face. The lesson isn't that sharks are harmless, and it isn't that jellyfish are secretly monsters either. It's that neither one is the villain our instincts built, and the instinct itself, not the animal, might be the thing most worth examining. So let's answer the question we opened with directly. If deadliest means total human deaths caused worldwide in an average year, the evidence points towards small, venomous animals, led by box jellyfish species in the Indo-Pacific, not toward sharks, whose annual fatality numbers remain remarkably low by comparison. If deadliest means the single most lethal creature you could personally encounter, the answer shifts toward animals like the blue-ringed octopus or certain cone snail species, animals so rarely encountered that their overall death toll stays small despite how potent their venom is. There is no single winner, because the word deadliest was hiding two different questions the entire time. What we can say with confidence is this: we've been wrong about the ocean's deadliest animal, not because the shark is harmless, but because we picked the most photogenic threat in the water and called it the biggest one, without ever checking the numbers against the quieter animals swimming right beside it. If a single tooth-based reputation from a 1975 movie could shape 50 years of ocean fear, it's worth asking what else about the ocean you've been taught that doesn't hold up against the data. Next time you're wading past a patch of clear water in the Indo-Pacific, remember that the animal most worth watching for might be nearly invisible, not the one with the biggest fin. We'd genuinely like to know before this video, had you ever heard of Irukandji syndrome? Or did the shark have your full attention the entire time? And if a blue-ringed octopus with no antivenom barely registers on the overall danger list, what does that tell you about how we should be ranking risk in general? Tell us in the comments, and we'll dig into the actual sting mechanism of the box jellyfish in a future video.